On December 1963, America's first female FBI informant boarded a train with 3 male informants. Their destination was Chicago, but their mission was more important than any location. They had been hired to infiltrate the highest levels of a major crime syndicate, but one of the agents wasn't what she seemed. As the days passed, her cover began to fall apart. The question is, who was she? What was her role in the conspiracy? And could the mobster sense that something was off about her? Her name was Kitty Caden, also known as Kitty Cowan. She was a married 27-year-old woman when the FBI approached her at a local bar. She was hanging out with some friends and drinking scotch. When 2 FBI agents sat down beside them, it was just a casual conversation at first, but it quickly turned serious. Those men weren't just regular guys. They were from the FBI, and they told Kitty that they needed her help to catch some dangerous criminals. This happened on June 24, 1963. But why did the FBI want to recruit this woman? Who was she, and why did the FBI think that she would be useful? Before becoming an informant, she was an exotic dancer and a mistress to Sam Giancana, a famous mobster. He was a powerful Chicago mob boss who had ties to Las Vegas and Cuba. He was also suspected of working with the CIA, which made him even more valuable as an informant. So the FBI asked her to become an informant herself and infiltrate Giancana's inner circle. They wanted to know what he was up to, and if he was really working with the CIA. So they offered her a deal: immunity from prosecution in exchange for information. In fact, they promised her $200 per week plus expenses, which was quite a lot of money back then. And since she was already Giancana's mistress, it wouldn't be too hard for her to gather intelligence. But being a mistress was risky business. Especially in the early 1960s, women were expected to stay in their lane and take care of the house and the children. If they worked outside the home, they were usually limited to low-paying jobs like waitressing or domestic work. And if a woman was caught having an affair with a married man, she would be shunned by society. However, Kitty was not your typical woman. She was independent and self-sufficient, and she didn't care what people thought of her. She had been married 3 times, and her last divorce had left her penniless. She had no choice but to move in with her sister and start working as an exotic dancer. When the FBI approached her at the bar, she was hesitant at first. She had never worked as an informant before, and she did know if she could trust those agents. But after some convincing, she agreed to meet with them again. At the second meeting, the agents laid out their plan. They wanted her to continue seeing Giancana and report back to them. With everything she learned, they would give her $200 a week plus expenses. But there was a twist. They also wanted her to marry one of their agents. That way she would have an alibi if Giancana ever found out that she was working for the FBI. She was reluctant at first, but she eventually agreed. The wedding took place 2 months later, on August 8, 1963. She married an FBI agent named William O'Brien and became Mrs. William O'Brien. Now, the plan was for her to travel to Cuba with Giancana and another mobster named Santos Trafficante. They were going there to meet with Fidel Castro and discuss possible business opportunities. The FBI believed that Giancana and Trafficante were working for the CIA, and they wanted to know what they were up to. So they decided to send Kitty along with them. She would gather intelligence and report back to the FBI. However, she was warned that if she was caught, she would have to make up a story about being Giancana's girlfriend. That way, she wouldn't implicate the other agent traveling with them. Her job was to seduce Giancana and get close to him. Then she would report back to the FBI with everything she learned. But it wasn't easy being a femme fatale. She had to wear sexy dresses and high heels and flirt with dangerous men. She also had to be careful not to arouse suspicion. She couldn't talk about the FBI or her mission. She also had to watch what she said around Giancana. If he ever found out that she was working for the Bureau, she would be in big trouble. The trip to Cuba was long and dangerous, but Kitty's hard work paid off. She gathered valuable intelligence that helped the FBI piece together Giancana's criminal empire. She reported back to the Bureau through hidden microphones in Giancana's home and hotel rooms. She also met with FBI agents in secret locations around the island. But as the days passed, her cover began to fall apart. Giancana grew suspicious of her and began to distance himself. He didn't trust her, and he was right to be suspicious. Kitty had been double-crossed. The FBI had recruited her to spy on Giancana, but they also planned to arrest him as soon as she got enough intelligence. She had risked her life to gather information for them, but now she was being used as a pawn in their game. When she returned to the United States, she was arrested along with Giancana and the other mobsters. She had been set up, and the FBI had no intention of keeping their end of the bargain. They had used her to gather intelligence, then thrown her under the bus. She was charged with conspiracy to import illegal substances and faced up to 20 years in prison. Fortunately, she had an ace up her sleeve. She had recorded conversations between Giancana and the other mobsters that implicated them in other crimes. She had been gathering intelligence for the FBI, but she had also been protecting herself. She used these recordings to strike a deal with the prosecutors and avoid jail time. She became the star witness in the case against Giancana and the others. She testified against them in court, and they were all convicted. But she wasn't out of the woods yet. She had made powerful enemies, and they were not happy that she had turned on them. She had been a member of the Chicago Outfit, one of the most powerful crime families in the United States. She had access to their secrets, and they wanted her silenced. She received death threats from mobsters and had to go into hiding. The FBI protected her and her family for years, but she never felt safe. She couldn't walk down the street without looking over her shoulder. She was constantly afraid that someone was out to get her. Eventually, she moved to Los Angeles and started a new life. She changed her name and moved on with her life. But the threat from the mob never went away. In fact, it only grew. In 1979, she was driving home from a grocery store when she was hit by a car. The driver was a hitman sent by the mob. He had been hired to kill her, and he almost succeeded. She survived the accident, but she was seriously injured. The mob was furious that she had escaped, and they tried again in 1981. This time they sent a different hitman, someone more professional. He followed her for weeks, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. But he never got the chance. She was driving home from a party when she was ambushed by several armed men. They forced her out of her car and into another vehicle and drove her to a secluded location. Then they shot her in cold blood. Fortunately, she survived the attack, and the FBI rushed to her aid. She was taken to the hospital where she recovered from her injuries. The FBI offered her protection, but she refused. She was tired of living in fear, and she wasn't going to let the mob win. She stayed in Los Angeles and lived the rest of her life in anonymity. She never forgot what she had gone through, but she was grateful to be alive. She had survived 2 assassination attempts and had outsmarted the mob. She had been a femme fatale, a mistress, a spy, a witness, and a survivor. When she died in 1998, the FBI paid tribute to her. They released a statement praising her courage and contributions to law enforcement. She had been a trailblazer for women in the field of intelligence, and her legacy lived on.